So we are on Peiches Amud Beis right at the bottom. Please, then that'll be easier. Okay, so the question is, when the verse talks about a person harvesting is allowed to eat, and an animal threshing is allowed to eat. So it doesn't talk about the opposite. What about a person who is threshing or an animal is harvesting? So how do we know? So we yesterday gave some answers. Now to Ravina. Ravina says, Lo Adam Batalush, an animal talking about things that have already been harvested, for example, threshing. Lo Shor a non-ox that's harvesting, Tzrichi Krai, need a verse. We don't need a verse to teach us that they're allowed to eat. See, the pasuk says, "Lo saksam shor b'disho." Don't muzzle an ox in its threshing. Michti, hold on a second. Kol mili isnehu b'chasima. Every animal is included in the area of chasima. In general, when we have a klal shor mishamis. Whenever it says shor, we learn out from Shabbos. It says on Shabbos, one place it says shor. On one set of the verse it says that your ox is the rest. In one place it says all your animals. So you see that whenever it says ox, it means all animals. So we know that all animals, so if it says ox, it means all animals have to thresh. You just leave it out. But it could have said lo di tirosh b'chasima. Don't thresh with muzzling. If so, don't thresh with muzzling. Sure, why does the Torah have to mention shor explicitly? To compare the person who's muzzling to the person who is muzzled. The person, the one that is muzzled, to the one who's muzzling. So what do we learn now? Just like the chosim, the person, because it's clear in the verse when you're picking that you can eat. So too, the one that's muzzled, meaning the animal, is allowed to eat when it's attached to the ground. And just like the one who is muzzled, meaning an animal, eats achal b'talosh, eats when it's already been harvested by threshing. So too the one who's muzzling, meaning the human being, when he's the worker, ochal b'talosh, he's allowed to eat when it's already been harvested. So you just learn out one from the other. So whenever this one can eat, that one can eat. Therefore, we don't need any other pasuk. Okay, Tanar Bana, the rabbis taught dayesh. The pasuk says dayesh threshing. Ma dayesh miyachad. What is it single out threshing? What's unique about threshing? Davar shikidu lekarki. Only thresh things that go from the ground. For ochabo, and the worker eats from it. Av kol shikidu lekarki. So do anything else that goes from the ground. Pol ochabo. The animal eats from it. Yatzit. What?
The worker, not the animal.
The animal, the worker, yeah. Whoever the worker is. I mean, animal and worker are the same, yeah. The worker. Yatzah cholev, that comes to exclude someone who's milking. Mechabetz is some kind of dairy process. It says it's some form of cheese making. It's not the classic kind of cheese making. So you're making lines in dairy. Umagaben is making cheese. We are Peites, about 10 lines down from the top. The first word is Vahamagaben.
89?
89, yes.
89, and the first word is
Vahamagaben.
Okay, I see it. Thank you.
These things do not grow from the ground, and therefore the worker does not eat from it. Lamali, why does the Bible say Mekisav? So the Gemara says Lamali. Why do we need this drasha? Mekisavo beker me'echa nafka. It says when you go in the vineyard of your friend. So it says only things that are like a vineyard. So clearly, cheese doesn't grow on trees, right? It's straight. No, you do need it. I would have thought to say of a kassiv Kamma. We said earlier yesterday. It says the word Kamma. It was yesterday, the day before, sometime recently. Kamma. It says the word Kamma. The rabbis called balakom, and to include anything that stands up. Rabbis nami meaning maybe it would also come to exclude things like cheese that don't go on the ground. It says anything that'll stand up. Well, cheese will stand up. So maybe it comes to include that. Kamashmalan's way to teach us. No, only things that are like dayesh, which grow from the ground, which are threshable, which grow from the ground. Tan'idik, another brayso that says dayesh. We learn from the word dayesh from threshing. Ma dayesh miuchad davar shebeshas kemar malacha. Just like threshing is the end of that stage of getting ready to eat. And that Paul can eat it. Av koshu v'shas kimar malach, anything that's finishing off the work, pol ochel ba, then the pol eats from it. Yatsa, that comes to exclude hamanachish v'shumim, someone who's weeding with garlic and vitalim and onions. V'ein gemar malacha ein pol ochel bahem. Since you're not done with the work, the pol doesn't get eat that. It says, hold on, lamali, why do you need that, Joshua? Nafka. We learn out from the pasuk says, and don't put in your own basket. That means in time they're putting we put in the employer's basket. That's when you're allowed to eat, but you can't put in your own basket to take home. You don't eat what you're eating now. But if you're not at time to put in any basket, you're not harvesting, you don't get to eat at all. So why do we need to talk about weeding? Weeding is not harvesting. So why do we need to say that you don't get to eat when you're weeding? That's not harvesting at all. It's only when you're harvesting. Even though you're taking the small ones out from the big ones. For example, Rashi explains that there are some onions that don't grow as well as others. And you take the small ones out and make room for the big ones. But the small ones are still perfectly edible. But the main thing, when you're planting an onion field, your mind is on the big ones. Yes, you're willing to harvest, you'll take whatever's available, you'll take that as it comes. It's not really the purpose of planting the field. So that's not really the harvest. That's called weeding. Just valuable weeding. It's not harvesting, it's not a partial harvest. It's weeding for now, but it's weeding in a way that you take what you weed. It's not, the main purpose is not for what you're taking out. The main purpose is what you're leaving behind. Then the worker does not get to eat. Tani Idach, another brisa says, Dayish, threshing, ma dayish miyuchad davar shelo nigmar malachto l'maiser, just like it's something that has not finished its work for maiser. The worker eats from it. Av koshlo nigmar malachto l'maiser, and the worker does not get to eat from it. What they would do with dates and figs, they would make them into cakes and dry them out, and at some point you have to sort of shovel it apart, smack it apart and break it apart so you can eat it. So at that point, it's already obligated meiser. You would not eat at that stage, even though you're working on things that grow from the ground. Once obligated meiser, you don't get to eat anymore. Tanya, the Brisa says, a bodel but tomorrow, someone who's separating dates, and with figs, then the worker does get to eat from them. Rav Papa says, Kitanya when it talks about those, betochalani, with the bitter dates that they don't get ripe on the tree, and therefore they're not really ready to eat until after they've been pressed together, and then you're separating them, and that only at that point that they're considered to be ready for meiser. Even only after they're separated, they're ready for meiser. Therefore, you can eat them even when you're separating them. Tani Edith, another brisa says, Dayish, we learn from the word Dayish from threshing. Ma Dayish miyuchad davar shelo nigmar malachto l'chala. So work is not completed for chala, it's not obligated in chala. Full ochel bo, and the worker eats from it. Av kol davar shelo nigmar malachto l'chala. Anything that's not finished for chala and obligated in chala, full ochel bo, the worker eats from it. Now, only thing that obligated in chala are the 5 species. 5 species of grain. So the 5 species of grain, they're not yet up to the chala, they can eat. Yatza Allah, she comes to exclude the kneading. Makatef, it has to do with the way you shape the breads and you're squeezing it out, and it's part of the shaping process. Va'ofa, and the baking. Shenigmar malachto l'chala, that already finished v'chala, ve'in pol ochel bo, and the worker therefore does not get to eat from it. Where it says v'halo nigmar malachto meiser. What is the point? We already said once it's obligated meiser, you don't get to eat. Chala is after meiser. So why is it that? Why do we mean to mention that the work is finished for chala? If you already can't eat, it's already eligible for meiser, and therefore you can't eat. And it says low kasha. It's not a contradiction. But chutzlorts, where there's no meiser, we're dealing with the case in the chutzlorts. There's no meiser to lake a meiser. Therefore, the meiser is not the red flag. So red flag is chala. It says hold on. If you're talking about chutzlorts, chala nami leka. The chala on Torah level is only obligated in Eretz Yisrael. So how can you say that mice? If there's no mice, there's also no chala. You can't be talking about that. Ela olamar, don't talk about in Eretz Yisrael. V'lo kasha, it's not a contradiction. The first 14 years that they were in Eretz Yisrael, took them 7 years to conquer Eretz Yisrael, 7 years to divide it up. They were not obligated in challah yet. Because it says elsewhere, the 7 years they conquered, 7 years they divided it. They're already obligated in challah, but not in meiser. Right? It says when the kisavo, when it says when you come into a land, you're obligated in challah. Everything else is when it's time at yeshiva, when you settle in the land. So challah comes in, it was obligated right away. Meiser was only after 14 years. They're not obligated in meiser yet. Right, so hold on, meaning meiser kagarim, is it the obligation of meiser that means to not eat? No, it's the finishing work. It doesn't matter if there's actual obligation of meiser. The stage of meiser is what makes you not able to eat. So it doesn't matter that the obligation of meiser didn't exist for 14 years, but it reached the stage of meiser. If the stage of meiser is what stops you from eating, then even if there's no obligation of meiser, the stage of meiser is going to stop you from eating. So that's not a good answer. So if the stage of meiser stops you from eating, then how can it be that the stage of challah will ever stop you from eating? So El Amar Ravina says, Kurach V'Tani, put all together. Put these two braces together. Dayish, what do we know about threshing? Ma Dayish Miyuchad, what do we know about Dayish? Dayish is special. The Davar Shalom Nigmer Malachta L'Maiser Ulachala. It's not obligated in Maiser or Chala. Ochel, the work and eat from it. Av Kol anything Shalom Nigmar Malachta, that the work is not finished. Maiser Ulachala for both Maiser and for Chala. Pol Ochel Bo. The Pol can eat it. So it means you even anything that's not obligated in meiser in challah, which is anything other than the 5 grains, then you as soon as it's ready for meiser, then you can't eat it. But anything that's obligated in challah from the 5 grains, even after it's obligated in meiser, the balabai separates meiser, but then you still work on it. You can still eat until it comes to the obligation of challah. Now Tosafos talked about why is it that it has to say kneading and shaping and baking. Well, you don't generally bake or knead until after you've shaped. I mean, you don't bake or shape until after you've kneaded. So once you kneaded, then it's already obligated challah. Why does it say you've kneaded or shaped or baked? So he says that there are certain foods that are only first he says there are certain foods that are only obligated at the time of baking. If you have a very thin dough, then sometimes you're not obligated. The kneading itself, when it's so thin, is not obligated in challah. Only when you start baking it. When you start baking it, that's obligated in challah. Shaping, Tosfos doesn't have a good answer though. Doesn't understand what's the case that you're only obligated in challah at the time of shaping. It's not possible. If something's shapeable, that clearly means it was kneaded. It can't be so thin that if it's so thin that you can't knead it, then it can't be shaped. So he doesn't know why it needs to mention the shaping. But at least the baking we can understand.
It's probably since those usually come together of kneading and shaping and baking all as a sequence. And we have to remember this is Torah Shebal Peh, that they learned this Bal Peh. So every time you come to that automatically the same sequence.
I don't know. I don't know anywhere else it says the same sequence. I don't know. I can't think of Mishnayos where it says the same thing. Maybe.
That's the thought, because I know there are a lot of times where sometimes the Gemara asks, why does the Mishnah bring this case? And the answer is, well, it's simple, but it's to keep the pattern in the Mishnah, which
I'm just not familiar with this set of 3 as a set. Okay. No, we're moving too fast. I don't know what I'm going to do.
You can always do tomorrow's daf.
Let the class out for recess early.
Maybe
you can always do tomorrow's daf, which is what we do in our.
Yeah, I don't want to get too far ahead. Okay.
Right.
The next bit is pretty hard though, so we'll see. Maybe it might slow us down.
As opposed to what we've been doing. Okay.
Well, today, the next bit, I don't know. I've had trouble with the next bit, so hopefully we'll get it cleared up. Iboy Lily asked the question: Ho, a worker, maj yahavhet? Can he stick it in the fire? Can he stick his grain? Like
can he roast
the grain? And can he roast the grain as eating it to make it a little bit more edible? He end up eating more. So the basic idea is he can eat while he's working. So can he do something to make the food taste better, so that he'll eat more? We want people. He can eat as much as his appetite is, but can he do something to increase his appetite by making the food taste better? Is it like eating grapes or something else? You're not allowed to add some other ingredient to make it taste better. You can only eat what's there. or not? Is it considered to be so when you're heating the grain itself, whatever it is you're harvesting, you're heating it up, making it better, easier to eat? Is that like eating something different, which you're not allowed to do, or it's just no, it's the same thing, you just heat it up? Does that make it allowed to eat? So Tashma, come listen to the proof. Rishaya Balabais Lahashkos Polim Yayin. The owner of the Balabais is allowed to feed the workers wine. Because they won't eat so much. You get full on wine, they're not going to end up drinking so much grape juice. They're not going to eat so much grape, they get a little bit full. And Rishayim Polim Latava Pitam B'tzir, and the workers are allowed to dip their bread in vinegar, so that they'll eat a lot more grapes. Somehow, eating bread and vinegar will increase your appetite. Now, this I've had trouble with, because later on it says you're not allowed to eat other things together with it. So I don't know. It says clearly. I mean, we just mentioned you can't eat other things with the grapes. So why? Okay. What's the difference here?
Remember, the balabais is obligated under the usual circumstances providing a meal. The meal is usually bread and whatever else, something to dip in. The balabais isn't allowed to say, don't, you should eat the bread dry. Why? Because that way you'll eat less grapes when you're harvesting the grapes. See, they're hired to harvest the grapes, but he's providing the meal of bread. They're allowed to dip the bread in something that makes the bread more appetizing, which in turn leads them to eat more of the grapes. The balabais can later give them wine, in order to try to prevent it. But he can't say to them and eat the bread dry.
You're saying this is time of having a meal before. I wanted to say that. I didn't see it.
It's during the day. It's in the middle of the day. They've started.
That later on, and I'm a base when it says you can't eat it with bread.
No, not eat it with the bread. I eat the bread now at the meal. Now I go back to picking the grapes. If I had dry bread, I'll eat a certain amount of grapes. If I had bread dipped in something that's a little salty or sharp or whatever, I'll probably eat more grapes to remove the taste of the of what I dip the bread in. Yeah. That's how I understand it.
Maybe. Okay. Fine. Anyway, so it says you're allowed to dip the bread in vinegar. It says when it says so you can eat a lot. When it says Lakshuri Gavra Lokame Boilan, to do anything that the person can do to himself to make himself eat it more, Lokame Boilan, we don't have a problem with that. He can do whatever he wants to himself to make himself eat more. That's not a problem. Boilan Lakshuri Pera, can you change the fruit you're eating to make the fruit taste better? What's halacha? Tashma, the Brisa says, Polan Ochlin Anavim Baroshi Manios, that the workers can wait till the edges of the rows. So the edges of each row is more exposed to the sun, so the fruit is more ripe. It'll taste better that way. So he can hold himself back to get to the edge of the rows. And then the edge of the rows.
Sorry, line wrong.
The third line there on top of Peitas on base. On the yeah.
Okay, all right.
So so you can eat Rosh Hashanah to the head at the top of the rows, more exposed to the sun, riper of theirs. As long as they don't roast it in fire. So you see, you can't roast it. Should be clear answer. Knows Hasam there. He can't take the time to roast it. It's not saying he can't roast it. It's saying he can't take off work to roast it. He can wait till get to the edge of the row and then eat there. He can't take off time to roast it. He has to keep working. The place we're asking a question is of his wife and his sons are there. He's picking the grapes, hand them to his son, and hand him the son. And the son roasts it on the fire, hands it back to him, he eats it. Is that allowed? He's not missing any work time for the roasting. What's the halacha? Tashma, the Paisa says, Lo yahav be'or, cannot roast it in fire, but yochel eat. V'lo yichmor ba'adama, can't bury it, warm it up in the dirt. Yochel eat it. Lo yafrech al gabe sela, cannot bang against the rock. Yochel eat it. Aval mafarech al yad al yad, but he can bang it from one hand to the other, but yochel eat it that way. So he says you can't roast it. And said no, Hasam also shouldn't be malach. It's the same thing. It's because they're wasting time. And when it says Hachim Mastaba, of course it's time of wasting time. The Isachadai Mishum Masuki Pera, because the whole point is to make the fruit taste better. Stella my Mizuki Pera Ika. What's the point of banging on the fruit, banging on the rock? I mean, that's not going to make it taste better. So then taste it's not going to make it sweeter. So then why is it saying you can't do that? It must be talking about you can't waste time Can't take the time to bang it on the rock. Now, why would you be banging it on the rock if it's not going to make it taste better? I don't know. Enough to, the more answer is it's for sure going to make it taste a little bit better. So even if you're saying banging rock will make it taste better, so therefore you can't bang it on the rock. So
because of Beitul Malacha,
no. First we wanted to say it's Beitul Malacha, and he said I proved to you it's Beitul Malacha. Says what's the point of making it taste? How does banging on the rock make it taste better? And so it says no, it's not a good. You can't prove that it's because of missing work. Banging the rock might not make. It's for sure going to make it taste a little bit better. So it could still be talking about making it taste better. You don't have a raya. You don't have a proof the other way either. First, we would say it proves that you can't. It's about making it taste better. He said no, it proves the other way. It proves it's clearly talking about wasting time. And no, maybe it is talking about making it taste better. Not clear either way. But either way, we can't prove anything. So, but if it doesn't, in the Gemara's question, it doesn't make it taste better hit against the rock. I don't know what the point of hitting against the rock is. I just don't know. And Tosos asked that, but therefore he says not like Rashi, but he doesn't have an answer for Rashi. Okay, Tashma, let's see another brayza. Polim shahayu odrim b'teinim. Their workers are digging with the figs, the godrin batamarim, or they're harvesting figs, or they're harvesting dates, votrim banavim, they're harvesting grapes, and a different word for each kind of harvest. Most Gemazaysim are harvesting olives. They can eat ubaturim, and they're exempt from meiser. The Torah gave them rights to it. The pitam lo yochlu, they cannot eat with their bread. Elam came not the rishus min balabayas, unless the owner of the owner of the field gave them permission to eat it with their bread. They cannot dip it in salt v'yochel and eat it. So you see, you can't dip it in salt. So no, melech vade cannot even acher dami. The salt is for sure like grapes and something else. You're eating the grapes with the salt. That for sure is like eating something else. That's not just making the grapes taste better. It's adding some external ingredient in here. But Gemara says, "V'lo yispos melech v'yochel." You're not allowed to dip it in salt and eat. For minu, but we have a challenge from there. A socher is a poel, someone who hires a worker, la'oder to dig, la'kashkesh and to weed under the grapes. Olives, thank you. You can't eat. Sechar limsok, sechar lilkot, ochel. It is hired to harvest. Different words for different kinds of harvest. Both there is anavim is grapes, most like is zesim, and lilkot is tainim. Ochel, then you can't eat. Upatra, and he's exempt. The Torah gave him the right, so he's exempt in meiser. Cuts us, but if he made a deal, he said, I'm working for you, and you have to, as part of my salary, part of my compensation package, you have to let me eat while I'm working. Even in a situation where the Torah does not obligate, for example, he's weeding or all these other cases, he says, but I'll make a deal, I get to eat. I used to sell pickles, and part of the deal was you get all the pickles you can eat. It was, it was selling them. They were clearly, done. The work was done for mice. By the time they're pickles, Paul is not allowed to eat. But part of the deal was you got all the pickles you can eat. So that situation, I'm saying there I can eat pickles. So it says achas yochel. Achas just to give a change. It takes a little up. Achas yochel. You can eat one at a time. Shtayim lo yochel. You cannot eat two at a time. The sof is melech. And you can dip in salt, the yochel, and eat. Or maybe saying you can't dip in salt and eat.
No, I think
it's saying you can't dip in salt.
I think he's saying you can. What does Rashi say?
Yeah, it sounds like from later on that you cannot dip in salt.
Speeds of mice. Yeah.
You can.
What?
I thought it said you can. You can do it.
You can find. You can dip in salt and eat.
The point is I think Rashi's conclusion
right. Try to prove that. Right. We said before you can't.
The balabait.
Right. We said before you can't dip in salt, and here it's saying you can dip in salt. Zahaya, which case? Ilema save. If it's the way it's read, the time of the end part, given a kata, since you made an agreement, you can eat however you want. He's obligated to give you this amount of food or whatever. Whatever the agreement was you made, you can do it. So there's no specific rule that says you can't dip in salt. El Alav Reisha isn't going back in the first half that when you're eating from the Torah, it says you can't dip in salt. Amar Abai says lo kash. It's not a contradiction. Kan ba'aretz, kan b'chutz l'eretz. One time in Eretz Yisrael, one time in chutz l'eretz. The Eretz in Eretz Yisrael kavos svisa, that when you dip it in salt, that means that's considered to be a finished product. It's now considered good quality, and you're obligated in meiser, and therefore you can't eat it. You can't, once it's obligated in meiser, now allowed to eat without taking meiser.
Therefore, you're not allowed to.
Therefore, you're not allowed to do it in the first place. Yeah. The chutz l'eretz outside Eretz Yisrael, lo kavos svisa. Then when meiser is only d'Rabbanan, so dipping in salt is not obligated in meiser, and therefore you're allowed to keep eating. Now, Amar Rav says, "Mi ika midi de ba'aretz kiva svisa." That in Eretz Yisrael we say that it is reached a stage of meiser, and thereby dipping in salt. I mean, derives on a Torah level of the chutz l'eretz, but in chutz l'eretz, where it's rabbinic, like lo kaboy svisa, and doesn't that svisa does not establish it for meiser. Mutar l'chiyah is totally fine. The general principle Rashi says that kol the tikkun run and kain derives the tikkun. The rabbis made their establishment, their rules in the same way the Torah makes its rules. So the Torah says dipping in salt obligates it in meiser. So then rabbinically, whenever meiser is rabbinically, dipping in salt rabbinically obligated in meiser. You can't say that it's on a Torah level it obligates, but rabbinic level doesn't obligate it. When it's rabbinic, doesn't make sense. Whatever works for Torah level works for rabbinic as well. So that answer doesn't work. Elo Amar Rava, rather Rava says, Bein ba'aretz, bein b'chutz l'eretz. We make the difference between Eretz Yisrael and chutz l'eretz. Chada, when you harvest one, lo kava svisa. Eating one at a time dipped in salt does not obligate it in meiser. Tarti, when you have two, kiva svisa. Then when you dip the two together in salt, that makes it obligated in meiser. Katas, but if you made a deal, bein savas, bein lo savas, whether I dipped it in salt or didn't dip it in salt, achas ochel, again, one at a time, that's not called merchandise, as we're going to see later on why. The general rule we said, I think yesterday, it said that anytime you sell something, it's obligated in meiser. So we're going to see shortly that it's only when you sell two at a time. So when I'm eating one at a time, harvesting one, eating it, that's not considered a sale, such that it's obligated in meiser, and therefore I'm allowed to eat one at a time. But to have two at a time, even if I don't dip in salt, it's going to be obligated in meiser.
Line again, please. First word.
The first line is tarti. So no, after that.
I see. Tarti kavua.
Yeah, right. Two. Yeah, so it's right.
All right.
So so katzatz. Then right. If you made a deal, bein safas, bein lo safas, whether you dipped in salt or didn't dip it in salt, achas ochel. One time you can eat, shtayim lo yochel. You can only eat two at a time, because once you have two that you eat together, that's called a sale, and we'll see shortly that's enough to obligate in meiser.
Right, because generally what happens if you pick two, you take the two and then you eat one and the next, and that looks like a. We'll
see. We'll see. It's a Joshua. Low katzas, if you did not make a deal, the low safas, and you did not dip it in salt, ochel shtayim, then you're allowed to eat two. Safas, but you want to dip in salt, achas. You don't take one at a time, one dip in salt, one dip in salt. Ochel, then you can eat shtayim lo yochel, you cannot eat two. If it's not dipped in salt and there's no agreement, you can eat two at a time. But if either an agreement to buy it or you dipped it in salt, then you cannot have two. Even though you got permission, because obligated meiser at that point. Kavas visa, and the dipping in salt is the dipping in salt is what obligates in meiser. And once if a tarti the kavas visa minal, and how do we know that when you have two together and you dip it in salt, that's obligates in meiser? Rav Masa says, the pasuk says, he kabatzim kemir gorna. When you gather them together, like the pile of grain, has to be something you can gather. One is not gatherable. Two, you can make a pile out of. Two is a minimum. You say there's a group of things here. Two is a minimum to have, assembling. You can't assemble one thing. So the fact is, as soon as you have two together, that's where we say that it's obligated in meiser. But one will never be obligated in meiser. The fact that I'm eating one, even though I bought it, but the fact that I only harvested one at a time, then I am not obligated in meiser, and therefore, even if I have a side agreement to eat, I can eat one at a time.
And even if you dip it in salt.
And even if I dip in salt. Two by itself as a sale, I can't eat, because that's enough that's already gathered in. In fact, it's a sale plus gathered, that's enough to obligate it. And if I'm working on toy level, then two is not enough to make it meiser unless I start dipping in salt. Once I start dipping in salt, then two is a problem. It comes out. So the worker has more latitude than someone who makes an agreement. A worker is allowed to eat 2 as long as he doesn't dip in salt. Someone who has a side agreement to eat cannot eat 2 even without dipping in salt, without taking meiser.
And why is dipping in salt important? Because salting something is preserving it.
Right, it's making more of a finished product. Yeah, it's more finished product. Yeah, right, more permanent. Yeah. But what we have not resolved here. The question is, this brisa, and at the end of the day, we're saying they're talking about the worker dipping in salt. We say the worker is allowed to dip in salt. So it doesn't look like we've actually answered the contradiction. The whole reason he brought there is a contradiction. Can he dip in salt? Can he not dip in salt? It sounds like the reason you can't dip in salt is because of meiser, not because of. The worker is allowed to dip in salt. So the worker is allowed to dip in salt.
Only subject to the limitations that the second
brisa. Why is that not called the navim davaracher? You're not allowed to add some other ingredient to the grapes. Sounds like salt is not. Before we said salt is navim davaracher. Before we said clearly, yeah, dipping in salt, that's a navim davaracher. Now we're saying no. The only problem of dipping in salt is meiser, which means it's not a problem of navim davaracher. So it sounds like it's saying. Therefore, it sounds like it's saying that roasting it should also be fine. Because if you can dip it in salt, for sure you should be able to roast it.
Right, except for the problem of bit.
Right. So just it doesn't say shema mina. So I've always wondered. Every time I learn this, I've wondered. So bottom line is that really the conclusion? It sounds like to me the conclusion is you're allowed to dip in salt as long as you don't do 2 at a time, and therefore if you dip in salt, you're for sure allowed to roast it. Just normally when the Gemara comes to a conclusion like that, it speaks it out, and here the Gemara doesn't say anything. I don't know. Okay, we can go a little bit on to tomorrow's daf. So Tanurban and the rabbis taught paros hamarachas b'tfua. You have cows that are I don't even know what the word to translate it. But basically, you take grain and you soak it in water, and you dry it out. And then after that, you make some kind of paste, and then you thresh it with animals to take off the shells. So this is at least with barley.
It's hard to visualize the process.
Right.
It's a little hard to follow.
Basically, you take barley and you get them wet, and they all stick together.
Okay.
And then you dry it out. No, then you dry it out.
You dry it out,
right.
And then you do the threshing.
Right.
You do the threshing.
And then they're paste after that.
They're not paste, no.
I thought you used the word paste in there.
You use the word paste, yeah.
I'm not sure that there's a paste. I think that the point is that in order to make it easier to remove the husks from the barley, so they soak it first, then they dry it in the oven, right? Rashi says, "Umiyabshin otan betanur," right? They dry it in an oven, and v'dashin otan beparod, and then they do disha.
Right.
With the oxen, the asir kli patan, v'hu chushla. That's the term chushla is the term for this particular process.
So the saying is that in this case they've already obligated meiser. So once you've gathered together and gotten wet and all this whole process, it's already obligated meiser. Therefore, you're not allowed to eat from it. But dashas betruma, or if they're doing a dashin on truma. Now, normally you don't take truma until after you've already done all the other work. But you're allowed to take truma. You could if you take truma early, it does work. Someone already separated truma or meiser separate meiser early before you finish all the work, and now you're threshing it at that point after it's already been made into truma or meiser. In over b'shum bal taksam, then there's no prohibition of muzzling. The fact is the animal is not obligated to eat it, therefore you're allowed to muzzle it, and you can prevent it from eating. Once it's obligated in meiser, or in fact that it's been made into meiser or truma, then the animal's not allowed to eat. But people can't tell. You looking at it, just looks like a regular threshing that's obligated. If we're going to look and see the animal and being Muslim, people can think you're doing Nevera. What should you do? How do you let people know? Maybe bulmi also mean bring some kind of basket full of that same kind of food. Tolala batraskel shapia, and hang it on the bit in its mouth. Basically, you hang a basket from its neck.
As you give it the same kind of food.
The same food. So
and then it eats from what's immediately in front of its mouth. So
it's not eating the thing.
It's
not eating from the things that are obligated, that are truma or meiser, or they're obligated in truma or meiser by the barley husks.
Well, the barley is there. The husks, it's breaking it apart.
Right.
because then after that you do zoret, which you throw it in the air, the husks get blown away.
Right. So you bring it and put it on its neck, and now they're eating. That way, people look at, people will not see it. See you muzzling it. You have the basket under its chin, and therefore it's eating from that, and it doesn't look bad.
That's Tanakam.
Right. Now, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Omer, maybe karshinim. You should bring karshinim. Karshinim. I've always wanted to tell you, right? They normally translate karshinim. Boris karshinim is lye, so it's whatever they make lye soap out of. I don't know what the name of that plant is in English. It could be the plant is lye. I don't know. But it's the plant that you produce lye from. But Tola, that's what you should give it. Shekashin yafos laminakol. They're the best quality food for animal. So don't bring in anything else. Bring in animal food.
Therefore, it will eat the animal will choose preferentially to eat.
I don't say animal's choice. I'm saying it's the best for the animal. When it's an obligation, let the animal eat what it's threshing, what it's working on. So then you just let it eat whatever's there. Once you bring something external, you don't need to bring specifically whatever it's working on. Why bring what it's working on when kashinim are cheaper and better for animals? Bring animal food. Why bring? If it's working on expensive stuff, don't give it expensive stuff when it's not even as good for the animal as the cheap stuff. And the cheap stuff that's better quality for the animal, there's no reason to spend more money on something that's not as good for the animal. So bring it kashina. That's the best thing to feed a cow. Really, you have a challenge on that. Paras and marachas is betvua. When in this case of marachas, though, is the case of the when you got to do wet and then dry and they're threshing it. Eino over mishum bal taksam. There's no avera of bal taksam muslim. Hadash is betruma meiser, but when you're threshing on truma and meiser over mishum bal taksam, then there is an avera of muslim. V'nachri hadash paras yisrael. So if a non-Jew is threshing with a cow of a Jew, in over mishum bal taksam, that he's not obligated in mitzvah, so therefore there's no problem of him muzzling. But a Jew is threshing with a cow of a non-Jew, even though the non-Jew, doesn't have an obligation over the Jew is the one who's threshing, so he's over mishum bal taksam. He does transgress because of muzzling. It's a problem. It's based on the person who's doing it, not the owner of the cow. So the kasha truma, kasha meiser. We have a contradiction between truma and truma. For it says threshing on truma, you are not obligated. Kasha meiser, a contradiction of meiser and meiser. It says before if you're threshing on meiser, you're not obligated to let it eat. And here it says by truma and meiser you can. I don't know if I want to get so far ahead. Okay, I'll do a little bit more. Lo kasha is not a contradiction. Kan truma, but kan b'dulei truma. Once about truma and once about that growing truma. Rabbinically, if someone would plant truma and it would grow more food, someone could try, Torah level, you could use it as a cheat, as a way to cheat. I take the truma, I'll give it a kohen. Instead of giving it to a kohen, I just plant it, and lo and behold, there's no more truma here. So it says anything that grows from truma is automatically considered truma, so you're not going to save yourself any money. That's a rabbinic obligation to treat it as truma. But since the only rabbinic obligation, Torah level, is not truma, so if an animal is threshing truma, now the animal gets to eat, because in a Torah level, it's not truma. Rabbinically, it's truma, but Torah level, the animal gets to eat. You can't make it. The rabbis, when they made the chumrah, they did not make the chumrah to such a degree that is going to be stringently on the animal, that the animal can't eat. So that answer is truma. El geduli meiser, but when you grow meiser, chulin inu. That's considered chulin. That's when you plant meiser, that does not turn into meiser. The Sonnet says in the Brisa, gedulei tevel, gedulei meiser sheni. I did. Yeah, sorry. Meiser kasha. A contradiction of meiser and meiser. The Tanya say meiser and meiser nominal kasha. Maybe it's no contradiction of meiser. Kind of meiser, kind of gedulei meiser. One's about meiser itself. One's about when you plant meiser and it grows. So b'shlomo gedulei truma. It's fine to use that as an answer for truma. When you plant truma, it turns into truma. Like doing meiser, when you plant meiser, chulin inu, it's chulin, it's not meiser. So it says in the Mishnah, dulei tevel, dulei meiser, sheni chulin. That when you plant tevel, which is something that has no meiser taken from it, you plant meiser rishon. So it says meiser sheni. When you plant meiser sheni, chulin, it's chulin. It does not keep that status. Why not? Because at the end of the day, it's yours. Meiser sheni is yours, so you're not going to save yourself any money by planting it. You're supposed to bring it to Yerushalayim, eat it, but it's not cheating anybody else. When you plant it, you're just taking something that's yours and planting it. So when it says, no, lo kash, it's not a contradiction. Hava meiser rishon, hava meiser sheni. Once about meiser rishon, you have to give to a Levi. Since meiser rishon you give to a Levi, so by planting it, you are stealing. Therefore, they made a decree that meiser rishon you do, if you plant Meiser Rishon, it is obligated in, it is considered to be Meiser Rishon anyway. Meiser Sheni is yours, and if you plant your thing, you're only cheating yourself, and therefore they did not establish that Meiser Sheni and you plant it is Meiser Sheni. It goes back to being Tevel. And it's not Tevel until it reaches the end of the work process. When you say Hava Meiser Sheni, both times Meiser Sheni, but Lokashim, not a contradiction. Hare Meir, Hare Rabbi Yehudah. The one is the opinion of Rabbi Meir, one is the opinion of Rabbi Yehudah. Hare Meir, one is the opinion of Rabbi Meir. The Amar Meiser Mamon Meiser Sheni, Meiser Mamon Gvo. Who the Meiser Sheni is owned by Hashem. Example, it comes up in the Mishnah and Kedushin. Are you allowed to marry one with Meiser Sheni? Does it work? So Rabbi Yehudah holds it does work. It's called your money. You're obligated to eat it with holiness, but it's your money. Rabbi Meir holds no, it's not your money. It's Hashem's money. So if Rabbi Meir holds it's Hashem's money, you plant it, you're stealing from Hashem. So therefore, it's still the rabbis would establish that Meiser Sheni you plant is Meiser Sheni. The rabbis told it's your money. You could even marry a woman with it. Therefore, you're only stealing from yourself, and therefore, it would not be Meiser Sheni after you plant it. Rabbi Yehudah. The Amar Meiser Sheni Mamon Hedyahu. That Rabbi Yehudah holds that Meiser Sheni is non-holy. It's your money. And why don't we stop there? It's sort of in the middle, but not really.
Classes are ready. Race to the playground.
Have a good day.